Well, they've passed the halfway point of the season. Flyers are trying to navigate what has become kind of a tight Eastern Conference playoff race, stay in the hunt for one of the two wild card spots. With our latest Broadcasters Roundtable, Tim Saunders with Brian Boucher, Todd Fedoruk, and Jim Jackson. Flyers returned from their longest road trip of the year. While they've played some pretty decent hockey against good teams, they took a little bit of a step back last week against the Dallas Stars. Results have been kind of mixed. Good against some teams, but it hasn't always translated into wins, and that can be pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I think frustrating is probably the right word. I think there's been some games where they've played well, probably deserved better. Didn't get it. That game against Dallas, I thought was a game that, when you look at the way they played, they got the result they probably deserved. It was not one of those games that we were typically used to seeing, and maybe it was a case of the road trip catching up to you, right? That long trip after the holiday break. I know they had the home game against Toronto, but maybe it took a game to catch up to them, and it's going to happen. Now I think it's about just finding a way to move on from that. Be real. I mean, Dallas is a very good team, and it's a team that I think if you probably ask most pundits, they'd be a team that will compete for a Stanley Cup. But there's certainly still some areas I think that the Flyers can work on, that can improve upon. Specialty teams, I think, has become a story now, and goaltending was a story. Sam Ersson returning is a positive step in the right direction, but I still think there's some guys that can elevate their games still yet, and Michkov has been cold recently. So there's going to be games where you play well and don't get the results, and then there's games where you don't play well and certainly don't get the results there either.
The weird thing to me was in back-to-back games, I thought the loss at home to Toronto was as good as they've played in a loss this year, and then they follow that up with kind of a stinker against the Stars.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what's going to be very interesting here is that Keith Jones and Danny Briere have said many times the players will tell them what they need to do as far as the rebuild. Go out, get players, go out, trade players from the team. And it's very difficult this year because the team's playing pretty well in a lot of games, not the Dallas game, but most of the other games. I even thought they played pretty well in the Vegas game, to be honest with you. But they're not, as you said to me, getting the results. So you look at the standings, and they're much closer to the bottom than the top. But you look at how they're playing, and you see they're playing pretty well. So how does that translate to the players telling them what to do? Because the process is pretty good. The results are not. I'll be fascinated to see if this continues closer to the trade deadline, how it impacts them. I would think if you continue with the process being good, that the results will eventually follow. They will have to get the goaltending straightened out for that to be the case, and obviously Sam's health has a lot to do with that. But if they don't get the results and they're still playing well, how do they handle it? Yeah. It's going to be fascinating to see.
Fridge, take us into the room a little bit as a former player. Because Torch says we have an identity now. We know how we have to play. But if we don't get the results, that makes the buy-in harder, that they've got to have a belief. Does frustrating losses threaten that buy-in?
Yeah. It's like one of those cases where you have to be a good winners or good losers, right? So how do you play when you know you're not going to get the result, right? And I've been on teams like that before. Most guys have, where it's losing, and it does easily become individual, but depending on the mix-up of players, that's why it's so hard from to play GM right now is because there's key elements that are part of that locker room that are the way they want to play. But then there's other players, it's like a personnel problem. We know that the way we want to play here, and the players that can play that way are going to stay here, but the other personnel that aren't, they're not going to do that. And then they're going to that's where the GM play comes in. They're going to have to fine-tune it, because what they've got as a group, I think, is important. You have to keep that with changing personnel. And I think when Tortorella's talking about the way we play, that's the structure, that's the five-man unit, that's how you have to play to win in this league. And then it comes down to the personnel and the players and who's going to step up, who's going to increase their game, or who's going to show the GMs they're trading me. And that's clearly playing itself out. So what does that do to a team? It can do a lot. And I think you'll find out who's really good professionals and good players is keep pushing forward and going regardless of the outcomes. You know what I mean? It's kind of the mode of operations that they have to stick with, because it's not going to get prettier. You know, they got to understand and take a look at the reality of where they're at in the standings. The race is there, so play the right way every night. We're going to come out with a win every night? I don't know. We're going to attempt to, right? The approach and the mindset has to be there, because you can in Philadelphia you can lose a couple games, but if you play the right way, the fans still come out. You'll still be appreciated, and that's the way you have to do it here. You know, so bring something entertainment. Like the last series of games, they played good hockey, and it's exciting to watch. But they're not getting the outcomes. They're not winning. So personnel changes are going to have to be made. It's inevitable.
Boucher, I'm always kind of reluctant on the air anyway to bring this up because of what's surrounding the departure of Carter Hart a year ago. Obviously, that affected a lot of lives and very few, none in a good way. But it had a fallout for this organization that they're really feeling now.
Yeah, there's been a vacuum created. And I think, and Torts talked about it, it's kind of put the goalies that they have now in situations that they didn't foresee, right? For Sam, I think he was more of a tandem, right? He was comfortable in that position. Now they're trying to figure out, can he be a number one? And Torts has mentioned it can be different for a guy that, you know, and I can speak to this, that if you're a backup or if you're a tandem guy sharing the net versus if you are counted on to be the guy. And it's not so much physical, the demand, as it is mental. And the pressure that you put on yourself and that you have to bring an A game consistently every night, the pressure that you feel with that is what typically overwhelms guys, why they can't do it, is why I couldn't do it. I mean, I could do it if I shared the net, but if you asked me to do it, let's look at the schedule and say, hey, okay, can you play 65 games? 65? That's a lot of games. You know, you're asked, you know, that means you got to play 5 out of 6, 4 out of 5. You know, it's a lot to ask of it. Sometimes it might be 8 in a row. Connor Hellebuck does it. These guys are very special. They're hard to find. And is Sam that type of goaltender? He's still trying to figure it out. I think part of it is injuries played a role. Yeah. So we don't know. But at some point, the management, Danny, Jonesy, they're going to have to make a decision on what they think Sam is. But yeah, it's been a big issue since Carter has left the team, because I think Carter was closer to that guy than Sam is. Right. Sam is still a question mark. It's not to say he can't do it, and I think he's a very talented goaltender. How much he can play, I don't think anybody knows.
Timmy, the numbers. Since the Flyers went into the second half of last year with a team save percentage of .907, which is very good. As it turns out, it's well above average now. The save percentage has actually been coming down league-wide over the last couple of years. Since he left, it's in the 860s. I haven't computed it here the last game or two, but it hasn't gotten any better. So 860, somewhere in there. I mean, goals against is more, in my opinion, a team stat, but save percentage, it's hard to win with an 8-6. And I'm not laying it all on the goalies. There have been some games where they've given up 17 shots and given up 3 goals, but the 3 goals were unstoppable. But still, over a long haul, and that's almost a full season now, from halfway through last year to halfway through this year, an 860-ish save percentage is almost impossible to overcome. So, yeah, the Carter Hart thing has changed the rebuild. There's no doubt about it.
And it makes it harder, Fridge, doesn't it, to evaluate even other parts of the game when you are tending to give up maybe a bad goal every game or two.
I think if you don't, that's the one piece that everybody knows. Every time you win, you need goaltending. You need goaltending. You need goaltending. It is such a prominent position. It's a quarterback in football. It's your pitcher in baseball. It's the last line of defense. It's like Bush is loving this right now.
It's all about the goaltending.
It's a critical
I also
piece.
want to change the subject.
Because it's a Philly subject, but
it's a sore subject.
Yeah, it's a sore subject, but they're unicorns, man. The good ones, like that can do the things that he spoke to.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're
How many are there
find.
though, Bush?
in the league now.
Five? Yeah,
Five.
there's not many.
Honestly, nobody's running out a goaltender 65 games a year anymore. It's just
Maybe Winnipeg.
right. And in reality, there's goaltending depth now. Now teams are really going with 3 goalies. I mean, Detroit's got 4 goalies. I mean, it's just.
We were always asking ourselves, what are we doing? We're carrying 3 goaltenders. And then you look around the league, and there are quite a few teams that are doing
I
that.
think some teams have the ability, they move guys up and down from the minors, so the one guy keeps going down to play and staying sharp. Carrying 3 guys is far from ideal, but I mean, the idea that you'd play one guy now it's almost like obsolete.
Yeah.
And if you find that guy, they're hard to find, and if you do find them, you just got to be careful because you'd hate to.
Look at last year. Hellebuck did not have a good playoffs.
Right.
A lot of people are thinking it's because he played so many games, but they're playing him that many games again this year.
And now they got a cushion this year, so will
Yeah.
they rest him in the second half of the year? He's going to play in the Four Nations. Will they find a way to get him some rest? Because it doesn't matter where they finish in the Central.
Yeah.
Even if they finish 3, it's not a big deal. No. I mean, it's.
Well, we'll follow your wishes and change the subject. Let's go to a more positive thing.
We'll get back to goaltending.
Oh, we will. Yeah.
We can't talk about anything else without that in place.
It's funny. I think back to our last Broadcasters Roundtable, and we were saying the biggest story at that point of the year, I thought, was the evolution of Travis Sanheim and what a dominant early part of the season he's had. Since then, I think the key guy has been Noah Cates. We've all talked about him almost nonstop, and seeing him take his game to where it is now has been really fun to watch.
Yeah, it has. I mean, and I think probably him getting to play center regularly has helped him. I think when he was on the wing, maybe there was some thinking and adjusting that he had to do, and once he got to playing center full time, it helped his game. And I think before I get the sense with young players, I live this too because I have a son that's playing, and I talk to him constantly about sometimes young guys get worried about making mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. They want to play it safe. They just want to survive, So the idea, and Torts has talked about this with Noah, just getting it and chipping it in and getting on the forecheck. Okay, that's a safe play. That you can do that and you'll survive. But what about the next play? Like, what about, figuring out how you can maybe hang on to pucks a little longer, make a play? Now, instead of just, worried about not turning it over, now they're telling him they want him to work on his offense. Well, if you say it, you got to give him a little bit of rope, and say it's okay if you make a mistake. You're not going to get benched. And I think that's what's taking place here is that they've told him they want him to make plays. They've given him an opportunity to play center. They've put him with 2 good workers in Foerster and Brink. I mean, they've been terrific, that trio. And now he's hanging on to pucks, making plays, and you're starting to see the fact that they said they were going to do something by giving him more opportunity and not being so hard on him if he does make a mistake and want him to get offense, and it's paying off.
Torch has been good with other guys, too, about saying, hey, we'll take the mistakes. We want you to try to make plays. Cates came in, as Boucher said, as a defensive, really sound guy, maybe ahead of his years, more mature than his years, and now he is starting to make plays. I love the fact that Torts admits that line was put together. He calls it the accident line, right? Because it wasn't that trio. He was putting pieces together on the other lines, and those 3 just ended up together, and it's been their best line for over a month.
And why? It's because of, that Foerster's a guy who can score, and Brink, I think, still can score, even though he's been in a slump. But all 3 of them recover the puck really well. I mean, we see it all the time. We're calling the game, and they lose the puck, they get it back, and many times then create something off of it. 3 guys on a line who recover the puck like that. They have dogged determination. I even think Brink's gotten better at it by playing with those 2. He's now really good at it as well. Cates has always been good at it. Foerster last year showed us he's good at that. So you wonder, though, and it's probably going to happen if you maybe move that line around a little bit, because maybe the other lines need a little bit more of that too. I still want to see Cates play with Michkov at some point. I know we've been hearing this for a long time, but I just think Noah would get the puck a lot for Michkov and then let Michkov work his magic. And Noah has a way of being in position to give line mates room. It's really subtle how he does it. His body position, how he gets the puck away from people. And I just think that would work with Michkov. We haven't seen those 2 together consistently, I don't think yet. A couple times they've been caught. In fact, they did create a goal once. But I just like to see that. And eventually we will, because all players seem to be playing with everybody. Yeah. But I would be fascinated with that. But I mean, how do you break that line up? Because they've been playing so well. I understand that too. But yeah, Noah's great. And Noah has offensive skill. You watch his collegiate career, he was known for his fancy goals, right? Yeah. So you always knew that was there. He has elite puck recovering skills and ability to knock plays down, but really good offensive skill too. So you're hoping it would all come together, and it's the C word, right? Confidence. He's got confidence now,
amazing.
And he's playing with it. And I think Foerster's playing now with more confidence. So it's been fun to watch those two, because they're part of the rebuild. They're younger players.
We've all known that Foerster had a certain skill set that they love, and he's only going to get better. Bobby Brink's gone a little while without scoring a goal here, but man, talk about a guy that's found a way to be impactful without scoring goals. They'd love to see him get some offense going, but he's played well.
Yeah, I really like the way he plays like he's 10 feet tall, and he's the work that he brings. It's all three of those guys. Like, they're kind of all realizing what they can do in this game, how they can make an impact all at the same time. And like with Cates too. He was out of the mix early on in the season, and that's sometimes you get caught just by being forgotten, not from anything that you do. It's just the rotation. And he was one of those guys that was kind of right on that bubble. And then he came back in, and it's been a rise since. But that line, and then going back to Brink, same thing kind of. And then Foerster at the start of the year. So they kind of ended up together. There's got to be something there too, because the way that they're playing and communicating together, the way that the puck is falling around, everything's being generated off of what they're doing together, right? Cates is actually really, I keep trying to think of a player to who he's like.
To compare him to?
Mark Stone a little bit, but I mean,
yeah,
Stone
but
has
even further back,
elite.
like a Brindamore.
Oh, wow.
He's smart like that. He's doing plays. Like, I know Brandy was a winger, but he's doing similar working style, sacrificial plays for the benefit of the other player.
Yeah.
That's why he's special. That's why you're falling in love with him. That's why I am, because I know the things you're talking about, creating space for the guys. You have to understand the player you're playing with, and then understand what you have to do. And you take a little less. You're not going to get the glory in that position. You're going to take a little less as a player. And if you're really good at it and smart at it, Noah Cates. That's what happens. Bobby Brink's going to benefit from that too. And that's why if you get him with a guy like Michkov, I've said that too, Timmy. We've talked about that. He's the guy because of those elements of his game. Like, it would be interesting to see those guys together, but I also don't want to pull him away from Brink because, he hasn't been getting a lot of numbers. Like, the stats aren't falling for him, but his hitting, his tenacity, the way that he's playing, he's getting the puck back, the creating of the turnovers. He's involved critically in plays that do turn into goals or turn into the next shift goal. And there is momentum in hockey. And every time that line's on the ice, there's no momentum. It's always on their side.
Yeah, I feel like with Brink before, the big question mark was his defensive play, right?
Yeah.
I don't recall them much in the defensive zone ever. Every time they're on the ice, they're in the offensive zone winning pucks. That's the best defense you can have. You don't have to worry about D zone if you're playing in the offensive zone. I think they got something with three young guys too. I think they enjoy playing with each other, right? They know that. I wonder if you put them in different spots, then they feel like, man, I got to get that guy the puck all the time, right? And sometimes that could change the dynamic. I think right now it's just a perfect fit, those three. And Brink, his tenacity, I don't even think about his D zone right now because he's in the offensive zone the whole time.
Right. They don't fit the bill of being a classic or a typical number one line. I'm not sure the Flyers really have that right now, do they?
They do in personnel. They do in personnel. It's just the mix. It's that mix. He's got to try to find that or find the right guys getting at the right time. But
the difficulty here is that his two most skilled forwards are both the same position and don't seem comfortable connecting. Michkov obviously playing the other side. I still think he might end up playing them on the same line and saying, one of you guys suck it up and play on the other side because they do seem to have a chemistry about them. Let's be honest, they're having trouble finding chemistry for Meach with a center. But if you can at least get chemistry with the other winger, you can put somebody, maybe Noah Cates, in the middle there and see what happens. But, hey, we're just putting the blender out here. I mean, there have been some really good combinations that have worked, and then it's an ebb and flow, as you know. It's not going to stay the same for very long. With any team, it just, very few lines stay together the whole year.
And as I look at Michkov's offensive production or lack thereof recently, I think you got to be reminded that they didn't expect him to be here this early. When they drafted him, they were perfectly comfortable saying, in 3 years, we'll have something to really work with, and he'll be a little bit more mature. The fact that they got him here as early as they did gives them more time to try to help him develop into what they think he can be.
Yeah, and not a bad thing. His hockey development and his hockey sense has to adjust. So there's a lot of knowledge coming at him. There's a lot of systems. There's a lot of how you play that's new to him, and adopting that is hard. You're breaking habits from a childhood that puts you on offense because he's so offensively minded. And now you've got to play defense, and that's North American style. You play defense first. Like it's all that. That's the way you win. And to learn that coming over is probably where he's at right now. And right now, I think it's like he's trying to apply that stuff in the game. Because I'm watching him, I'm seeing him stop and stay D side on the pile. Like that's not what he used to do. He used to go around the pile on the offensive side, regardless of where it was, and keep backing out, right? Cheating on offense, right? Now he's being more responsible. He's thinking and doing. And I think that's what's a good sign. But obviously his offense is hurting. Hopefully, once the defensive side clicks and he's on the right side, he has some confidence there, he's going to know to cheat better. That's the thing. He'll know by playing the proper defensive style, he's going to know exactly where to cheat against everybody. So that's kind of the goal. Like it's just this element right now, this window of time where he's got to learn it.
He also has started to shoot the puck more, I think, and I think that might be effective. Do you think he gets just how important this next offseason's going to be for him? Because that's going to be maybe a life-changing summer for him.
Well, it's Hortz mentioned it, a few days ago, right? Talked about the importance of this offseason coming up. I found that interesting that he brought that up at the midway mark of the season. We're already thinking about the summer and what Michkov needs to work on. He'll get to it. I mean, I think right now he's probably more focused on how can I produce in the moment. And I think it's important to look at for Michkov, like get these next 5 weeks up until that Four Nations tournament. Focus on that, get 5-game segments and get him through that, and then get him a breather, and then regroup, and March can be a different story. The summer will come when the summer comes. Any young guy, I mean, we've played in this. It's a hard league. I mean, you're going to have stretches where you go 20 games where it doesn't go your way. It doesn't define who you are. Yeah. These are all good learning experiences for him. I think he's had in a big picture, a very good season so far. I think he's learning some hard lessons, right? The defensive side of the game, when he can anticipate. I won't use the word cheat, but anticipate. Yeah,
thanks, Brian.
So that he can. Yeah, I guess if you're not cheating.
TK always says
if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Yeah. But, I never heard anticipate. If you're not anticipating, you're not trying. But, I think those tend to work their way out when the bounces start to come your way. Your reads are a little bit better, and the results come. I can't imagine going to another country not being able to speak the language. Yeah. The food's different. The culture's different. Yeah. The schedule's different. Everything's different. Yes. I mean, this is a hard adjustment for the kid. He's doing fine.
Human nature is too that. I mean, we've been here and watched this from the start of this rebuild. Human nature is we want to believe they're a little further ahead than they are. They're still evaluating key guys, and names that come to mind first is Jamie Drysdale, because he's only been here for about a calendar year, and I'm not sure they still yet know what he is.
No, I'm not sure Jamie knows at this point. It's been a struggle. Let's be honest. I mean, the numbers are not good if you include last year too. I did think when he came back from his injury or his hiatus, when he missed all that stretch, that he had about 5 or 6 games where there were real signs that he was figuring it out. But I really think, and you talk to Brad Shaw, he seems to indicate this too, that it's just Jamie almost kind of overthinking things. He's trying to be so good. He's trying to make the perfect play. We were talking about earlier playing safe. Sometimes he plays it too safe. Sometimes maybe the other way around. But almost when I watch him and you guys played, I almost get the feeling like 6,000 things are going through his mind when he has the puck on his stick. And it's like, I don't know if there's any way to simplify that. I mean, I'm sure they've tried, but the guy has tremendous skating ability laterally. His numbers would indicate he has creativity. I don't think we've seen a lot of that yet. I thought we saw it maybe in his first 3 or 4 games when he came over last year, but then maybe he started to think too much. I don't know. But that is, I mean, obviously he's a big part of this, and if he is not part of the future, they're going to have to make that decision probably pretty soon. So where we go with this is what I was saying earlier about where they go with this on trade deadline and leading into the summer is going to be fascinating, because the rebuild, as they say, the players will tell you. And, what is Jamie Drysdale telling them right now? What are they thinking?
Yeah, and that's the key. You mentioned the trade deadline. It's about 2 months away, and a lot's going to have to be determined between now and then. Obviously, the management's made clear that Flyers are not going to be buyers. They're going to be sellers. Asset management, there are a few assets here that are going to be interesting to other teams. It's just a matter of whether they can meet the Flyers' price.
Yeah, and if you look, we talked about this, a couple days ago, right, before one of our games. There's so many teams that are in this cluster.
Yeah.
Everybody in the East is still
In the
alive.
East. But not all teams are equal, because if you look at Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, am I missing one?
Pittsburgh, maybe.
Pittsburgh. They're in. I think they're in buy mode. These franchises are in places where their fan bases expect their team to make that next step and make the playoffs. I don't ever recall the Flyers, as you said, they would be sellers. They never said, we're trying to win the Stanley Cup this season.
No,
now,
right.
Of course, we can all dream, and we'd love that. But with that being said, if those teams are buyers, how many sellers are there? Right? So it's going to make the trade deadline interesting. Some teams that are going to be buyers, I think, could potentially overpay for players that they feel like they need, and it could increase the value of teams that are looking to sell.
And that's the key phrase, right? Because I think there are a couple of guys that we know who we're talking about, that the Flyers may not want to necessarily move, but if you get overpaid, you got to listen to offers, right?
Oh, you got to listen for sure. It doesn't mean they have to pull the trigger on anything, but it's just going to make the trade deadline, I think, really intriguing.
Yeah.
Because in the East, there are those 4 teams. And as an outsider looking in, I would say to those 4 teams, if I was advising them, I'd be like, I think you need to settle down. I don't know that your team is a Stanley Cup contender, but it doesn't matter. Maybe to them, it's just about getting in the playoffs for their fan base, and maybe getting to the second round, and what that does.
I mean, the 3 you mentioned,
Go for
Buffalo,
it. Yeah,
obviously
create the
Buffalo,
market.
it's been forever. Their owner has to want to get into the playoffs.
Okay.
Detroit, the tradition, they had all that long run, and Yzerman actually was patient for 2 or 3 years when the fans were on his case.
Right.
Now I think he's to the
Different.
point where they almost had
Fire
to.
the coach
And
again.
Ottawa, new ownership, they're trying to get a new arena, all that. They need to build out something. So they're like further than the Flyers, right, in their rebuilds, or at least in years they're further. Yeah. So the pressure that the Flyers fans might be feeling about the Flyers getting to the playoffs, it's not even close to
those teams. Exactly.
So in Pittsburgh, it's about the Crosby legacy and getting him back in there.
They've got 2 years to find a way to find magic, to do like what we did in 2010,
exactly,
which is get in and then who knows,
lightning in a bottle,
right? Get somebody to carry you into the playoffs and goal, and
I'm unavailable. I'm sorry.
And the assets in that market, like the assets the Flyers have, if that's going to be such a, I believe that those teams are going to make bids. You could feel it in their buildings. The fans are on them. They want, the itch is there. Teams make moves when that's on the case. And if they're on the bubble, it's going to be, we have, like the Flyers have all the picks and the players, like the assets are these are critical. Like they're that working guy that you need to have on your team that can be moved around places and is going to adapt and be a veteran player. We have players like that can help teams get over the bubble, but they can also help teams get in. So it's a good position for the Flyers to be in from that perspective, in that case, for sure, because, we'll get a lot more for our buck.
With all that being said, there are, I think, 4 teams out west that are for sure bottom feeders, and they will be selling as well. Yes. So they're going to have some assets that they're going to be looking at.
The taboo, and I'm hesitant to even bring it up, but it does cross my mind, is as much as we're going to be sellers, does the goalie situation force us to consider a veteran stopgap? Is that
for
possible
this year?
For this year and next?
moving forward, I think they should think about it. I mean, this year, if you start to go into sell mode, I mean, at that point, I think you just try to see how it gets Sam, see if Sam is the guy, if he can stay healthy, and see what you have with the other two. I mean, we've really, I say we, the public, everyone has jumped all over Kolosov and Fedoruk, but it's the same as with Michkov. They're coming over here.
Yeah.
Fedoruk understands the language and speaks the language better, but it's still new for those guys. And your position, the goalie, is the toughest. And, after 5 or 6 games, we're making these evaluations on these guys. And I know Fedoruk looks a little different. He's this big, huge guy. And Kolosov's different in the exact opposite way. He's kind of a smaller but very athletic guy. But I think we really have jumped quickly on them, and I understand why, because they were thrown into it. But in reality, they need way more games before we make decisions on them. So I think they have questions to get answered with the guys here. To answer your question, Timmy, I don't know as if they need anybody this year. Now, if you're talking about next year and you're starting to talk playoffs, maybe then you've got to get a veteran in here. But the questions that get answered on these guys will have something to do with that.
All right. January is going to be really busy from this point on and against a lot of division teams. So I think that's going to be decisive in how they, 6 of the 8 games at the end of the month are against division rivals on the road. Yeah. They're going to see the Islanders 3 times. They're going to see the Devils 3 times. So how they come out of that may determine exactly what happens at the deadline. Yeah. There is one other thing that we could have a little fun with. I want to mention that it's a league initiative. Every team in the league has announced its quarter-century teams, first and second teams. We all voted on it. And for the record, I just want to make sure that Brian Boucher knows that you were on my first team, not the second team. Wow. And the fact that you're not on the first team, in a word, is brutal.
All right, and here, my broadcast partner, he wasn't on my first or second team.
Oh, that's
and we've
terrible.
already had this discussion. So I said, well, you made it. And then he thought about it, and I thought about going,
you want to go over the list?
Maybe you were the first team if I had voted for you, so maybe I feel even more guilty now. But I went, to be honest with you, with the whole list, I went with guys based upon their totality of career. Bush has clearly had the 2 biggest moments for a goaltender in the quarter century. Yeah. The win over Pittsburgh, how many saves did you make after you let the first one in? 52? Is that 53?
56.
56. Yeah. And then, of course, the shootout over the Rangers.
He doesn't win much,
but
when he does,
the dance, the whole thing.
City on his shoulders.
Overall numbers, I went with other guys, but Roman Cechmanek was number 1. You voted Roman Cechmanek, did you not?
I did.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Roman's body of work, it wasn't.
What is this, all-time
really
Flyers?
From
quarter
2000.
From 2000. And how old do we feel? Because we called them all.
Very old.
Yikes.
But Gagne, Giroux, Richards with the forwards on first team, Desjardins team, and Cechmanek. I don't have many arguments there. I had Richie second team. I had Danny Briere first team. Danny Briere's on the second team. Sean Couturier, who I was pretty worried about making the team. But when you look at his numbers, he's 4th in scoring over those 25 years, in addition to being a Selke Trophy winner and twice nominated. So I thought he deserved it. Jake Voracek is the other forward. Defensively, Chris Pronger and Ivan Provorov. And similar to you, Bush, I didn't vote for Pronger only because he didn't play enough games, in my opinion. He only had 130 or so games. Was he the best defenseman we had over the 25 years? Probably, Chemo and he. But to me, length of service meant a little bit more than it did for some of the voters. I'm happy I was wrong. I'm happy you're on the team.
I'm happy you were wrong.
And Brian Boucher is the other member of that second team.
And that's the biggest reason.
Do you guys have any gripes with the other positions?
No, I agree.
Who'd you guys have for the Black Aces?
You.
Yes, number 1.
Todd Fedoruk. Absolutely.
The toughest ones for me were the goalie and the second team defenseman.
Yep.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Those were the most difficult. Braden Coburn played a lot of games here.
Yes.
You could make a case for him. Could make a case perhaps maybe for Matt Carl.
Yeah. Ghost. I actually had Ghost on mine.
It was
only because Ghost, when you look, had 2 of the best years offensively for any defenseman in the 25 years. His rookie year and his third year, 60 points. Now, he had some down years, but when you put all his numbers together, he was right up there. So I'm probably regretting that I went back and used the NHL.com and put the aggregate numbers all and went 2 numbers oriented. But other voters outvoted me and got Pronger and Boucher. The other guy who I think really deserved consideration among the forwards is TK. I think because he's on the team now, the same with Coots.
You think that hurt him?
I think it might have, only because we think he's not done yet. But he's fifth in scoring, and he's going to score a lot more.
And I think in some of the cases with guys like Gagne and Richards and these guys, I mean, there was big moments here in Philadelphia, big playoff moments that, where I think for fans and media like that they remember those moments, and for TK it hasn't been there yet.
These other guys haven't had the ability to put a team on their shoulders or put a city on their shoulders.
Not once, but twice.
My sciatica is acting up recently. There, the back issues I have from that.
But he also, in between those two great moments, had the longest shutout streak in NHL history.
We just celebrated that anniversary.
Yes.
Congratulations
Thank
again.
you.
But his reaction to that is awesome, because he said it was such a streak. The league shut down for a year after that to redo the rules to make it more offensive.
We can't have a plugger doing that.
How can we have a third string goalie setting NHL records? Shut this down.
Well, again, to congratulate you was the biggest reason to bring that up, and well deserved. 8 of the last 9 games in January, again, against division rivals. 6 of the 8 are going to be on the road. When we get through this gauntlet coming up, we're going to know what has to happen or what likely will happen at the deadline. With our latest Broadcasters Roundtable, for Brian Boucher, Todd Fedoruk, Jim Jackson, I'm Tim Saunders. Enjoy the games.